Let me tell you something. The best player in the world plays in the MLS. Who would have thought that it would ever happen, bro? Like, I never would have thought. The crazy part is that Inter Miami is last place in the Eastern Conference. They have to make the playoffs. Will they be able to make the playoffs with only 12 games to go? What does Messi have to do to bring Inter Miami into the MLS playoffs? Really quick before we get into it, I'm going to give a nice little lay-down breakdown, full 100 on the MLS, just in case you don't know how it works. In the MLS, there's an Eastern Conference and a Western Conference. In the Eastern Conference, there's 15 teams. In the Western Conference, there's 14 teams. Each team in the MLS plays 34 games. In each conference, the top 7 teams automatically make into the playoffs. The 8th and 9th spot have a play-in round where they play against each other, and that determines who gets that last and final spot for the playoffs. Then the playoffs come around, Eastern Conference champion, Western Conference champion, they play against each other, and that's the MLS champion. So it's not like in Europe where you play a league, 38 games, whoever has the most points is the league champion. No, here in the MLS, you want the playoffs, baby. Like I said, we like to be different. Inter Miami is last place. They're dead last. 15th place out of 15 teams. And it sounds really bad, especially when I say dead last. It sounds really bad like that. But let me tell you some good news. But before I tell you the good news, I'm going to give you the bad news, because that's how life works. You always get the bad news first, and that way the good news makes you feel better. Inter Miami have only 12 games left, and they're currently 14 points off of 9th place Chicago Fire. Last year, Charlotte finished 9th place with 42 points. If 42 points was good enough to secure 9th place last year, that means Chicago is only 10 points away with 10 games to go. Now, I know it doesn't work like that, but I'm just painting a picture. That sounds kind of crazy when you're saying that Chicago only needs 10 points to get to where 9th spot was last year in the next 10 games. So they're good enough to have 6 losses in the last stretch of their season and still make the playoffs, you know, quote unquote. The good thing is that Montreal is in 8th spot and they also have 32 points. So both the play-in spots are very close to the rest of the teams behind them. And my last piece of bad news is just a hypothetical, or at least just a question, elephant in the room. Messi hasn't had any rest, basically. It was a little less than a month of vacation. He hasn't had any preseason with Miami. He got there and started playing competitive games right away, and he's 36 years old. So in the next 12 games, is he going to play every game, 90 minutes a game for the rest of the season? I mean, if they want to make playoffs, they better have him do that, and he needs to do that. But I'm just saying, where is he going to get his rest? I'm just asking a question. So now that the bad news is out the way, we're going to talk about the good news, okay? Here are the 12 remaining games that Inter Miami have left. Out of the 12 games, they are in the East 10 times. So not only does that mean that there's less travel for them, but that also means that they still have a lot of points up for grabs. Out of the 12 games left, they have already faced Orlando, Nashville, Charlotte, Atlanta, and Cincinnati, beating every single one except for Nashville and Cincinnati, who they tied and beat on penalties. But, I mean, they still beat them. You know what I'm saying? Let's dive a little bit deeper into the 12 remaining games that Inter Miami have left. 6 of them are against direct competition for that 9th spot. Red Bulls, Toronto, New York City FC, Chicago Fire, and 2 games against Charlotte. That's 18 crucial points against teams that are not only in their way, but respectfully, some of the weaker teams in the MLS, if we're being honest. Now let's look at the next 5 games for every team that is competing for that last playoff spot. We have Inter Miami, Toronto FC, New York City FC, Charlotte, New York Red Bulls, DC United, Chicago Fire, and Montreal. If the game is highlighted in red, that means that they're playing against a team that's in the top 5 of their conference. If it's white, that means they're playing against a team that's 6th to 10th spot. And if it's green, that means they're playing against a team that's 11th to 15th place. I also have a star on the games that directly involve Miami. So Inter Miami and Red Bulls next game are against each other. So there's a star there. And then also Toronto has a star where they play Miami on their 4th game out of the next 5 games. If we're judging based on what I have on this chart, Charlotte and Montreal, I would say, have the hardest schedule coming up. The easiest schedule could very possibly be Inter Miami alongside Chicago Fire and DC United. Here's a second chart that I have a little bit of different color coding. Sorry for so much colors, but I think that they do some justice here. So if it's in yellow, that means there's a game that they directly play against each other. One of these 8 teams will play against each other. If it's in blue, that means it's an Eastern Conference game. Again, I think it was just important to point out that there's just a lot of points still up for grabs, and especially in the next 5 games, there's going to be lots of teams playing against each other. That means right now you see this 8th to 15th spot. In the next 2-3 weeks, this 8th to 15th is going to look very different. Here is another chart where I split the 7 teams that are battling it out for the playoffs with Inter Miami. I have 3 different categories: not a threat, could be a problem, and ones to watch. In the not a threat category, I have Toronto FC and NYCFC. Toronto is honestly probably the worst team in the league. They've lost the last 7 games. They just look like a lost cause. I'm not worried about them at all. They're going to drop into the last place in no time. NYCFC have 1 win in the last 16 games. They're also 3 games ahead of Inter Miami. So again, if Inter Miami win those 3 games, they're going to be in front of those teams, and those guys are just going to drop. The teams that could be a problem are Charlotte and Red Bulls, because Charlotte, for me, I think that they're not that good of a team. In the Leagues Cup, Inter Miami really busted their ass, but they do have 2 games versus Miami. So that's crucial. Like, I think if Charlotte could nick a point here or there, or maybe even win, you know, that would be really big in the standings. They could get themselves closer to the playoffs while also keeping Inter Miami at bay. With the Red Bulls, I just think that the fact that they are going to be Inter Miami's first MLS game with Messi, you know, it's a big game. And there's talks of Messi might be resting too. So I don't know. That might be a big momentum shifter there. If Red Bulls win, they go up to 32 points, which would tie them with Chicago and Montreal for the playoff spot. And then ones to watch, I think these guys are the biggest challengers that Inter Miami have: DC United, Chicago Fire, and Montreal. DC United have 2 wins in the last 8 games, so they're not on a good streak, but they do have an easy schedule coming up, so I think they'll get some points here or there. Montreal have a little bit of a harder schedule, but the advantage I give to Montreal and DC United is that they don't have to play Miami anymore, unlike Chicago, who do have to play Inter Miami. So I think that game, Chicago Fire versus Inter Miami, is going to be a really decisive game. Inter Miami need to win that game. If Chicago Fire steals those points, then I think that would mean that Inter Miami is missing out on playoffs, while Chicago probably secures their spot. My prediction is that Inter Miami is going to make the playoffs for sure. 8th or 9th spot, I think, is up for grabs. I think they can get that spot for sure. 7th and higher, I'm not so sure about that. I think the points there are a little bit too high, and they would really need those teams to just severely shit the bed in the last games of the season. But if they have Messi, anything is possible. The best player is playing in the MLS. Again, so crazy to say. If you're a betting man, bet on Inter Miami making the playoffs. That's easy money. If you're a betting man, I probably wouldn't bet on Lionel Messi winning the top scorer. He's going to get his goals. He's going to get his assists, but I think he's a little bit far off from doing that, so don't put that on that. Even though I will say, I think if they make the playoffs and go far enough, I think Messi is going to become Inter Miami's all-time top scorer within 6 months. Isn't that crazy to say? Higuain right now is at 29. Messi's at like 10. If they have enough games, that's 12 games in the season plus all the games in the playoffs. I think he's going to do it. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys leave your comments down below. Let me know about your predictions. Let me know if you think Inter Miami is going to make it. Let me know what you think about my statement about the best player playing in the MLS. I know it's going to piss off some of y'all. And if you liked it, I hope you hit that subscribe button so you can keep coming back for more. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.